So I know most of us have been raised with pretty simplistic ideas about sex and gender, and the two words are often used interchangeably. I myself have been raised, in fact, not knowing there is a difference, because in German as well as in Greek, and I'm mentioning these two languages because I am a German-Greek crossbreed, there is only one word for both. You can make differentiations between the two by adding clarification words, but it still is really fishy, and an explanatory TED Talk needs to follow for people to understand the difference if they've never heard about the different concepts before. In English, thankfully, there are two words, and they're not new either. The concept has been around for decades now, since 1955, introduced by the sexologist John Money. I do understand people who are saying there are two sexes, male and female, and these always align with the two genders, man and women, because most of the times that's the case. But that's not very inclusive now, is it? So let's just learn more about it. What are the differences between sex and gender? And why do they need to be acknowledged? A pretty fun and easy way to remember the difference is this. Gender is in the brain, while sex is in the pants. This is of course not entirely accurate, and you know how it can be about things not being entirely true, but let's keep that in mind for now. So the biologically defined part is called sex, and the socially constructed part is the gender. Sex is, in humans and other animals, a biological attributed set of organs, genetics, hormones, and so on. It is primarily associated with physical and physiological features including chromosomes, gene expression, hormone levels and function, as well as, and not limited to, reproductive or sexual anatomy. The biological definition that categorizes every animal into male or female sex is that males produce small mobile gametes, in humans the sperm, while females are organisms that produce large, costly, and often immobile gametes, in humans the eggs. Humans have 46 chromosomes, or 23 pairs of chromosomes, and while most female humans have 2 X chromosomes, most male humans have 1 X chromosome and 1 Y chromosome. Both sexes, male and female, have testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone, but I'm sure you've associated testosterone more with males and estrogen more with females, right? The only reason that happens is that males have higher levels of testosterone and females higher levels of estrogen. In fact, estradiol, which is a predominant form of estrogen, is critical to sexual function for people who were assigned male at birth as well. Estradiol plays a significant role in sexual arousal, sperm production, and erectile function. It is not only doing stuff in the female reproductive system, not to mention the tons of other functions of this hormone that have nothing to do with the reproductive system of a human. Then there are the primary sex characteristics, which are the reproductive organs. Penises in male humans, vaginas in female humans. But keep in mind that no two penises look the same, and neither do two vaginas. Then, secondary sex characteristics that are also usually identifiable in adult humans. This includes facial hair, breast tissue, and vocal range, for example. Because of this easy and innate categorization, we're often used to make quick assessments about the sex of a fellow human. But secondary sex characteristics, for example, vary greatly. Don't tell me you've never seen a man who for the life of him cannot grow a beard, or who actually has more breast tissue than I do. Well, that's not very hard to do, so. I also bet you've met women who have a deep voice instead of the squeaky noise I'm making here. And let me be honest here, but I and many females I know need to plug our mustaches every few months. So no, neither facial hair nor having fat at the right places makes you a man or a woman. And now, yes, you could say that these characteristics, even though very variable, as we just discussed, are in the end defining whether you are a man or a woman, because we need this categorization to make our lives easier, and they might, don't get me wrong. If you were born as a female and identify as a woman like I do, then kudos! Good for you, you lucky bitch! We have it really, really easy in life. But if you noticed, I was talking about most males and most females, a continuum of hormone levels in both sexes and varying sizes and shapes of primary and secondary characteristics. This entire thing is just a huge continuum on every level, even biologically. Just because the two extremes are a male that has super huge primary reproductive organs, a super super deep voice and a thick beard, and a female with high-pitched voice, a gorgeous vagina and ovaries, no facial hair, a broad hip and huge breasts, it does not mean that every male and female are exactly that. And apart from the obvious differences between female women and male men, there are also intersex people. Intersex is a term used for a variety of differences along the sex spectrum in which a person is born with a reproductive or sexual anatomy that does not seem to fit the typical definitions of female or male we just discussed. For example, a person might be born appearing to be female on the outside with a vagina and breasts and all, but having mostly male typical anatomy on the inside. Or a person may be born with genitals that seem to be in between the usual male and female types. A girl, for example, may be born with a noticeably large clitoris or lacking a vaginal opening altogether, or a boy may be born with a notably small penis or with a scrotum that is divided so that it is formed more like a labia, which are the lips, the folds of skin around the vagina. Or a person might be born with mosaic genetics, so that some of their cells have two X chromosomes and some of them have one X and one Y. Though we speak of intersex as an inborn condition, intersex anatomy does not always show up at birth. Sometimes a person isn't found to have intersex anatomy until they reach the age of puberty or find themselves an infertile adult or die of old age and are out of seat. Some people live and die with intersex anatomy without anyone, including themselves, ever knowing. As you can see, the spectrum is not only counting facial hair or the fat around your breast, the variation is real. People saying that they will only take biology into consideration when categorizing their fellow human beings, and that biology intended them to be men, so they are men, whatever they want to say or live like, are just not very educated in terms of how varying biology can be. I mean, it is ridiculous to think that there are thousands of different skin colors or colors in general, but biology and nature said, yeah, no, regarding sexes, there are only two, and they're as different as night and day. Even night and day are on the same continuous spectrum, for crying out loud. So nature, biology, doesn't decide where the category of male ends and the category of intersex begins, or where the category of intersex ends and the category of female begins. Humans do. Usually, doctors get to decide how small a penis has to be or how unusual the combination of parts before it counts as intersex. Humans decide whether a person with XXY chromosomes or other combinations of chromosomes, non-typical levels of certain hormones, or combinations of anatomical parts are gonna be categorized as intersex or not. And in real life, outside the doctor's office, it's even harder to categorize someone as intersex, so we usually just don't and stick to the male and female. And this ends up being an oversimplified story. Gender, on the other hand, refers to the socially constructed roles, behaviors, expressions, and identities of girls, women, boys, men, and gender-diverse people. It influences how people perceive themselves and each other, how they act and interact, and the distribution of power and resources in society. It varies from society to society and can be changed. Gender identity as we view it today is not confined to a binary girl, woman, or boy, man, nor does it have to stay a certain way for the entire life of a person. It exists along a continuum as well and can change over time. There is considerable diversity in how individuals and groups understand, experience, and express gender through the roles they take on, the expectations placed on them, relations with others, and the complex ways that gender is institutionalized in society. Here as well, society and the oversimplification we tend to use tells us that there are only two, women and men, but some people identify as non-binary. This is an umbrella term for people whose gender identity does not align with the male-female and man-woman binary. Others identify as bigender, so as both a man and a woman at varying points, or agender, meaning they don't identify with any gender of the two. Then there are transgender people who experience a mismatch between their gender and sex. So they are biologically a typical female, for example, but identify as a man. And then transsexuals are the ones that experience this mismatch and then get their sexual organs medically adjusted to fit the gender they identify with. And no, this is not just attention-seeking behavior or a disorder. This is worth an entire video, so I'm not gonna do this now, but If you ever say or even think that again, I'm gonna hunt you down and then very peacefully talk you to death. To be fair here, I think it is worth mentioning that people who are identifying as their assigned sex should be called not normal, but cisgender. I'm sure there are many more types of genders that one can identify as, but you got the hint. There are many genders and you do not have to identify as a woman just because you were born with a female reproductive system. And the same goes for males. Now, of course, what we see in a transgender person who has not undergone surgery to adjust their appearance to the gender they identify as, or what we see in non-binary or gender non-conforming people is often the sex they were assigned at birth, which may lead us to categorizing them as men and women. And this is called misgendering. If you do this on purpose because you simply disagree with them being allowed to identify as anything they want, you are called an asshole. Misgendering can be intentional and unintentional, but in both cases it can be very hurtful and triggering and disrespectful. Ultimately, both the concepts of gender and sex are socially constructed, and the lines between the categories only exist because we choose them to simplify our world around us. This does not mean that the function of reproductive organs, for example, are made up, or that you can change your genetic code just because you want to. But it means that we as humans assigned the roles and made the socially acceptable categorization guidelines. So we as humans can also acknowledge that and not be dicks to people who do not fit this neat, unrealistic picture of ours. And all this is not even including the whole lot of sexualities you can have. So now that we both know so much about it, I really want us to be inclusive in our use of language, okay? Ask people what they identify as. Don't just assume it. And if they do not identify as what you see, then just get the F over yourself and respect them enough to still call them how they have asked you to. It does not make a difference to you, but it makes a huge difference to them to feel the inclusion and respect. Believe me, most of them will have had a fair share of horrible experiences because of society not being respectful and inclusive enough. There's also one more thing that makes no difference to you, but a whole lot to someone else. Your likes, comments, subscriptions, and shares make me crazy happy, even though it is no work for you. So if you liked that video, please let me know. And I'll see you next week with a video on why women moan during sex. Yeah, I know, having a channel on human biology is so much fun.